Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
First lesson today is taken from 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Glasses on. Now the wife of a member of the company of prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. But a creditor has come to take my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" She answered, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." He said, "Go outside, borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not just a few. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your children and start pouring into all these vessels. When each is full, set it aside." So she left him and shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." But he said to her, "There are no more." Then the oil stopped flowing. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your children can live on the rest." The second lesson today is taken from Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 29. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from the region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting at us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was instantly healed. Today on this Presbyterian Women's Sunday, we will be talking about women in the Bible, some of them that you may never even thought about. Besides their faith, the thing that the 2 women had in common that we just heard about is that we don't know their names. You know the story of the Samaritan woman at the well, but do you know her name? You know the story of the woman who anointed Jesus' feet with oil, but do you know her name? There are so many women in the Bible, widows, mothers, daughters, and wives, but we don't know the name of many of them because they were only known as someone's widow, mother, daughter, or wife. Some were good and some were bad. Some were products of their circumstances, but many of them took actions that were significant or demonstrated their faith in God. And some of them benefited from miracles, as in the case of the woman with a jar of oil and the woman who stood up to Jesus for her daughter's sake. What about Pharaoh's daughter? Where would we be without her if she hadn't saved the baby Moses? Even many of the women who are named are not well known to us. Do you know anything about Dorcas? Names are important. Among other things, they show background, ethnicity, family, and relationships. But women often lacked standing in the church, as in society, and this was true well into the 20th century. In church records, they were known by their husband's name. So you, Ethel, you would be known as Mrs. John Wilkerson, and that would be the only record the church had. And in the 1920s, in the Presbyterian Church, women were still not allowed to pray in mixed company. Church officials cited Paul, saying women were not allowed to speak. A man at a General Assembly in the 20s, thinking that he was being funny, is quoted as saying, "If you set women to praying, the next thing you know, you'll set them to preaching." Well, that was actually prophetic. The women speaking to you today would not be able to take part in this service, except for all the women who went before us, beginning with the women in the Bible, named or unnamed, who carved out a place for us. Today you will have the chance to hear about some of the little known or unnamed women of the Bible.
Hello. I get to talk to you today about the daughter of Pharaoh. I am the daughter of Raymond Lewis. I am the daughter of Janice Lewis. I'm the wife of Charles Washington. I hope that you also know that my name is Belinda Washington. So the daughter of Pharaoh that I'm speaking of is the woman who we consider the adoptive mother of Moses. We never know her name. She's mentioned in 5 verses, and yet her contribution that saved the Israelites is pivotal. One place where she is mentioned is in Exodus chapter 2, verse 5, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And the other verse where the daughter of Pharaoh is mentioned is Exodus chapter 2, verse 10, and the child grew, and she in this case is the wet nurse, or Moses's mother, brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called him Moses. But I think that in order to really understand something about the daughter of Pharaoh, we should listen to what she said when she first sees Moses in that basket of reeds. This time she says, "This is one of the Hebrew children." She knew. She also knew what her father had commanded about the Hebrew children. She knew what she was doing. Did she rebel because she thought her father was wrong? Or did she just think that she could be sneaky and slip this one by him? We'll never know. Either way, she ensured the well-being of Moses from then until he grew up. And because Moses was allowed to grow up, but also was educated in the Egyptian ways, she saved the Hebrew people. She helped to lift the Hebrew people out of their bondage in Egypt. The daughter of Pharaoh, whose name was known once, is a righteous figure. She is only mentioned in this couple of verses and is never mentioned again. We don't know if she fought against her father in other ways. Did she help the Hebrew people in other ways? We don't know. We don't know if she has a close relationship with Moses. All we know is that she saved Moses from certain death, both from the Nile and from her father. And without Moses, our story would have been very different. So thank you, daughter of Pharaoh.
Good morning. My name is Paige Lockhart. I'm here to talk about Deborah and Jael. I initially struggled to find a message for Christians in the story of Deborah and Jael. In itself, it appears to be a story about war and violence, albeit focused on the actions of women rather than men. The story of Deborah and Jael is found in Judges chapters 4 and 5. Deborah was a judge of Israel. Judges were given authority to judge Israel as God's voice to the nation, correcting abuses, redressing grievances, and in addition, on many occasions, judges acted as military commanders, leading the nation in battle against foreign adversaries. While Deborah was a judge, Israel was conquered by the king of Canaan, whose military commander was Sisera. Inspired by God, Deborah sent for an Israelite named Barak and told him that he must attack Sisera, and if he did, God would give Sisera into his hand. Well, Barak's response was to tell Deborah he would only go if she came with him. Deborah then said she would go, but that because of his equivocal response, the Lord would deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman rather than into Barak's hand. When the Israelites managed to defeat the Canaanites, Deborah gave thanks to God. This is found in Judges chapter 5. It's called the Song of Deborah, and it is one of the oldest portions of the Bible. Jael's part of the story is even more violent. When the Israelites' forces overcame the Canaanites, Sisera fled to the tent of Jael because he thought that her husband, Heber the Kenite, was friendly to him. Well, Heber may have been friendly, but apparently Jael was not, as she deliberately lured Sisera into her tent and did everything she could to encourage him to sleep. And when he did fall asleep, she drove a tent peg through his head. There is no indication here that God told her to do this. Jael is simply the woman God chooses to carry out Deborah's prediction that Sisera would be delivered into the hand of a woman. What lessons can we draw from this tale of females bursting out of gender roles? First, Deborah obeyed God's call and trusted that God would fulfill his promises, despite the fact that the forces of Israel were badly outnumbered by Sisera's army. Barak, on the other hand, did not trust in God's power, but demanded that Deborah accompany him. Perhaps he thought she would not do so, and he would be off the hook. But Deborah had the courage of her convictions because of her faith in God. Jael acted without specific direction from God, but she fulfilled God's purpose even without knowing it. So, the lesson I draw from this is that we are told to trust and obey when God calls us to action, and to have faith that God will guide our actions in accordance with his purposes, even when it seems impossible.
Good morning. I'm going to speak to you this morning about Phoebe. In the Greek, the word Phoebe means pure, radiant and bright. In biblical terms, Phoebe was a notable first-century woman in the church of Cenchreae, an ancient Greek port. In his letter to the Romans, chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, Paul states, "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deaconess at the church of Cenchreae, that you may receive her in the Lord as befits the saints, and help her in whatever way she may require from you. For she has been a helper of many, and of myself as well." Paul describes Phoebe as our sister, an affectionate designation. He calls her a servant in the church at Cenchreae. Paul also calls her a succorer of many, defined as someone who gives help in times of need, distress, or difficulty to those who are oppressed, in need, unprotected, or despised. Her home was the meeting place for early workers in the Church of Christ. She was a woman of means who contributed to Paul's leadership position by providing shelter and hospitality for him. Paul was planning a missionary journey to Spain and wanted to solicit support from his journey from the Roman Christian Church. However, at that time, the imperial post of Rome was not available for private correspondence. Therefore, Paul chose Phoebe to bear his epistle to Rome. He provided Rome with her credentials and introduced her as his emissary, his diplomatic representative. It was likely that she joined a caravan traveling overland, and on her way, she had the opportunity to stop at many Christian churches, bringing greetings and messages directly from Paul. It is unknown how her life ended. However, we can be sure that her goodness and sympathy, her loyalty and kindness, and her industry and trustworthiness marked her as a woman whose ministry inspired all who came into her presence.
Good morning. Perhaps you have heard the name of Dorcas. Dorcas was another New Testament disciple. But what does Luke tell us about her in the book of Acts? Let's look at the 9th chapter of Acts and listen to what Luke wants to share with us. Now in Joppa, there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time, she became ill and died. When they washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples who heard that Peter was there sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing him tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put them all outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. And he turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." Then she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand, and he helped her up. Then calling the saints and the widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Well, from Luke's account, we know that she was a disciple. She was a seamstress as well, for she made tunics and other clothing for people around. She was a woman of good works and of charity. So what was she like? She was definitely well respected. She was also a person of faith, because when she died, her friends called to Peter to come and to see if she could come back to life again. We believe she was a successful businesswoman. We do not know if she was a widow. In those days, many women who had lost their husbands would get their dowry back, and so consequently they became ladies of means. It could be that she was a widow. It could be that she was a single person and had never been married. She served doing those things that she had always done. She had always been a seamstress. She had always done good works. So she continued to serve Jesus, to serve his teachings by doing the things that she had always done. And she did all of those to the glory of God. She was compassionate. We hear talk about widows and about others that were around. When she was raised from the dead, her friends came back in. We also know that many people came to follow Jesus after Peter brought her back to life again. So as they say in the New York Times, what's the takeaway from all this? Well, the first takeaway is use your gifts. If God has given you a talent, hers was sewing, use that talent, whatever it may be. Stay faithful. Make giving a habit. We believe that Dorcas, all of her life, was a faithful follower. Build relationships that will show an impact on your life. Make service a priority to others. Be a disciple. She enthusiastically served Jesus. Let God use you as a witness. And Dorcas let God use her as a witness in her life and in her death. God has always gifted women to make positive changes to their surroundings, as he continues today to do in this congregation and in this world. Submit your talents to the Lord and leave a legacy.
I recently heard a poem by Maya Angelou, which has a line I think is appropriate for us to end with today. She said, they existed. We can be and be better because they existed.